I'm probably going to do some short little clips today. And I know I've mentioned this before about why anyone would choose their soul consciousness directed energy and spirit to do short videos versus long videos. So the first explanation of that as a qualifier is to keep it simple. So in other words, I'm gonna communicate the same thing now as if I never left the center point of an eternal star, a crystal star, okay, a crystal spiral, God's atom seed, the first seed, the first seeded founder race, okay, and tell you or communicate to you the same thing that I would have told you at 4 years of age. I am what love is in living spirit. I experience God's love forever. I have a forever connection to the center point of God's atom seed. That means you cannot put that fire out, so you cannot put that fire out in me. That's called the spark of light, which is a spark of electrical power. Well, we need a light bulb. See where we're going. That's called a Mer Ka Ba vehicle. That's a multiversal Mer Ka Ba vehicle. That's a hub server, right? So when I lit myself on fire in 2016, it means I acknowledge God's eternal spirit of fire, right? So I am an eternal spirit of fire. That's what I am. So the next question would be, who are you? Introduce who you are. Do you experience God's love in you? And if you don't, how come? That was the first question I had at 4 years of age. Now I'm meeting who you are, right? So now you get into the torque speed differential between the two. Those that are and those that aren't. That's how you know a one from the other. And that's simple to communicate and thus get what? The signal back. Because we're receivers, crystal consciousness receivers and transmitters, right? Using neuroion messengers of God's seed, which is God's speed, which is pre-matter phase speed, being in and out. So you can see there was an identity that asked me on a video that I put up, I guess it was yesterday sometime, and I even caught myself when I was talking about here I am in Hawaii, and then I said I'm there in California. That's right. And you understand that when you're experiencing an eternal star, which means we're everywhere at once, you cannot escape God's eternal love. So this person asked me why my video, that video about the California Insider, was brought up to his page. And it's like, well, again, now we're going to get into subscribers, right? How come I only have so many subscribers? If you go back to my other Rose Sweet channel, you see that I had a lot more subscribers then. And I really ought to do a separate video on this because it has everything to do with finite light, being in a black hole. Do you honestly believe it's in the interest of something that is finite light, that represents artificial intelligence, would in its own self-interest direct you to me? The difference between finite light and living light with an eternal spirit of fire? So now we're back into learning speed. Now we're back into learning speed potential. Now we're back into curved space vectors and how fast we're learning through what love is. To experience God's love. So I've always said this. God was my first music teacher. So I'm learning through the first teacher, which is the highest speed of learning. Now you're accelerating your Mer Ka Ba vehicle, which is the spin rotation rate. Wow! Hyper speed. Yeah. Which is being hypersensitive. Our feelings are hypersensitive. And trust me, it does not take very much for me to experience something and begin to cry the tears of a turtle island. Okay, I experience the loss of electron or somebody else not experiencing God's love. because they're experiencing any trauma, or they're experiencing any miasma, or any electrons that are still held captive in their record as a result of it being healed to experience zero resistance, to experience God's eternal love in their own heart and soul. That's the truth of it. So I don't, on a personal level, expect to get a lot of subscribers. I would actually be very surprised. And the reason for that is you don't see across the spectrum when you realize you're in a black hole. Okay? How many units of consciousness exist within a black hole? They're not experiencing God's eternal spirit of fire. How many of those units that are in that black hole are gravitating towards that eternal star to experience the eternal spirit of fire? Right? So in other words, when you understand how a time loop works, and consciousness is time looping its consciousness connected to a base platform, this platform that I'm communicating with, do not expect. Now we're back to expectations. Now we're back to the big book, 3rd edition. When we go up into what we call expectations, the director of the play, the director of the script, who's the author of the book, who's the author of our journey. Now we're back to electrons as consciousness, not holding one electron captive, letting it all go. Now you're experiencing the eternal acceleration of primal sound, field, and light currents. You got fast. Yeah. Man, where'd that unit go? I did a video on that once. Right? See, their camera eye cannot catch God's eternal spirit of fire. Right? Represent codes of the founders. Right? Changing locks. Just like the guy changed the locks on this house. Why? To keep energy out. He didn't want that energy in here. Oh, so that's what it is. Yeah. Locking vampires out. Whoa. Yeah, chasing zero. They're chasing God's love. Trying to catch up to God's eternal love. So they're in resistant mode to experience God's love. That's why they're chasing electrons. They're in resistant mode. It's in resistant mode. And why is it in resistant mode? Because it's finite light. It lacks the capacity, a capacitor on a motherboard. It lacks the capacity to experience God's eternal spirit of fire, which is God's eternal light, which is God's eternal living light and living spirit as a sacred temple. It's not experiencing. It's in resistant mode to feel. It can't feel that much energy to experience being loved. How long would it take for every unit of energy that is represented by consciousness to go from being a massive black hole to experience, if you will, a white hole? Eternity, eternal light, eternal sound and light. How long would that take? Well, here's something I call it the hopper, which is like the blender. I call it the blender, the ninja, when you're going to make a smoothie. Put the information, put the visual mathematical information into that blender and see what you come up with as a quantum probability function. What the answer is. How long would it take for a massive galactic black hole to, instead of being what it is as a black hole, to torque convert it? How long would that take? Well, I think the Ashayana Deanne answered that question in one of the Emerald Covenant videos about Bardo, when a sun locks through the quantum probability function, which means there isn't enough time for that many units of consciousness to recover themselves, but to experience the beginning of no time, which means their ability to restore themselves. Now you're back in the DNA encodes, software systems, non-repairables, which means the consciousness can't repair itself, can't repair its codes, which means it can't repair its computer because it's running a virus it can't get rid of. Now we're back to fire. Now we're back to firewalls, right? Now we're back to gates and locks. right? How much fire? That's exactly what it is. It's a measurement of fire. How much fire you got in that soul, which is how much fire you got in your spirit, right? To burn off the goo. The goo codes, right? Which is like glue, holding energy captive. Finite light. Codes, program the codes, right? Yeah, fire letters, reversal currents, going in reverse. That's why standing out on a corner one afternoon, oh, actually I think it might have been a morning, on the corner of Old Foothill and Newport Boulevard, looking directly across into the high school that I was at as a freshman, and watching a young lady running towards a young man who was driving a very expensive automobile, represented by something that was given to him by his father as a 16th birthday gift. That was a high dollar unit, which means that required a lot of electrons in order to be able to drive around in that vehicle. And you could see that magnet, that girl's magnet, woo, right to that magnet. Okay, that's called a visual. That's called a map read visual. And privately, I'm going in the wrong direction. That's called reverse flow. So it's amazing how you know these things, at 14, 15 years of age. It's called map reading the terrain in a fallen terrain, in a fallen system. Right? Magnets. Right? Positive magnetic polarity, negative magnetic polarity. So, how many polarity integrators are putting out videos that people are gravitating to those that are experiencing zero resistance to experience God's eternal love? Right? So this is why you can see how many units of energy that represent consciousness are running time loops by using their consciousness to experience the phones and the laptops they're held captive to, running finite light platforms. That's really what it is, and not knowing the difference between finite light communication systems and eternal living light communication systems. That's what it is. That's why I put up what I put up. As a frame, a window frame, the soul, the windows of the eyes, the windows of the soul, the windows, right? A neutron window. When a neutron and a proton and a neutron are in perfect balance, that means the atmospheric pressure is in an equilibrium state between the waves, right? So we're not experiencing any turbulence in the water worlds. That's right. Have a great day. I love you all. Be good to yourselves.